Hey guys, Stockaholics, thanks for being here today. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. The big sell-off that we've seen in the past week or so has grabbed my attention. I'm sure it's grabbed many other people's attentions. I don't currently own any Bitcoin, but I will say that in times in the past I have. And at some point in the future, I may again own Bitcoin. Now, the times in the past that I did own Bitcoin, I wasn't really thinking about it from an investment perspective. I was actually using the stuff, which is, I think, a little interesting to a lot of people. And I'll talk a little bit about that in this video. But these days, I do kind of think about it in terms of investment potential. And yeah, we'll talk about my thoughts on that in this video.
Bitcoin, this digital currency that's out there that people say, oh, it might be the next big thing. What do you think?
I think it's rat poison. Put him down as undecided.
He's anything but undecided. This weekend, Vice Chair Charlie Munger likened trading cryptocurrency to, quote, trading turds. The always eloquent Charlie Munger joins us now. Hi, Charlie. Thank you for being here. This is getting a lot of attention, more than it probably deserves, because there are much bigger issues that we deal with here. But, Charlie, did you know there was supposed to be a Bitcoin conference this weekend in Omaha? Had they asked, you could have been the keynote speaker. Would you have said yes?
Well, they were probably crowded out by a group of people that wanted to have a conference on sewage.
Well, you called rat poison 5 years ago, right here in these chairs on Fox Business. You called it rat poison, but that was when it was about $150. Today it's $9,000. It had hit $19,000.
So it's more expensive rat poison.
But there are some people who were able to make some money. And we heard from people who are very passionate about this. And they said, oh, those guys are just trying to protect their old school investments in U.S. dollars. What do you say to that?
Well, I think these idiot booms do harm to a country. They frequently come to bad ends, and they cause economic consequences that are bad for the whole damn country. And so I like it when my country steps hard on idiot booms instead of fanning the flames. And if there's ever anything that needed stepping down on hard, it's Bitcoin.
All right, so Charlie, he's not a huge fan. He thinks it's a idiot boom. He thinks it's rat poison. He thinks that it's a tool for illicit money operations. He also mentions he likes it when the government comes and steps on idiot booms. And this, I think, is a key point on why I actually like Bitcoin, and it's the concept of a government stepping on you, right? So I'll give you guys a story about poker, and I spent a lot of time playing this game, especially in the past. So when I was very young, there was a poker site called, well, legal age to be playing poker, by the way, but still much younger than I am now. There was a site called PokerStars, and you could go on there. You could deposit US dollars through the traditional banking system on the site. You could go on there. You could play all kinds of card games, poker kinds of card games on the site. And at the time, that was very popular. There was a lot of people who was playing on this. There was some other poker sites that were sprouting up. There was one that was like full tilt that a lot of people played on. And for a time there, it was awesome. It was a cool way to spend, an afternoon or a night playing poker tournaments, for fun. It's fun until you lose. And I was at that point in my time, I was more of a recreational player. I just did it for fun, for the most part. Yeah. But in about 2011, all of that changed. It changed overnight. So one of those poker sites, I think Full Tilt, was engaging in kind of a money laundering kind of a thing, right? And so the feds in the U.S. government, they stepped in, and overnight, just all of those poker sites, if that you might have been playing on, which wasn't a problem. There was nothing illicit or illegal about it at that point. They were just gone. And if you had your money on there, you were freaking out, you're panicking, you're like, oh. And a lot of people had to wait a long time to get their money off of these sites. And a lot of them were legitimate. Full Tilt, I don't think it was. But that put a permanent stain on the entire industry. And the government came down, probably seeing it as an idiot boom, and just shut them all down. And a lot of them never came back. PokerStars, I think, is in a few jurisdictions in the United States, maybe a decade later, when it's huge in Europe and other places around the world. But in the United States, still today, it's very difficult to play online poker. So I wasn't about to say, hey, the government's just going to step on me. I'm not going to play this game anymore. Screw you, right? That's kind of that's the point of Bitcoin, right? Now there are all of these, which is weird because there's all these dodgy internet poker sites out there, but that you probably located in jurisdictions away from the reach of the U.S. government. And over the past, after those shut down, those sites became a lot more popular. Now, one of the ways that you could go and play on these sites so that you could circumvent the traditional banking system was to go and buy Bitcoin. And then you would send that to the site, and then the site would credit you a certain amount of dollars to play on their sites. I think Charlie, he also has this thought that it's largely used for illicit activities. I think if you look at the actual percentages of the amount of illicit activities that it's used for, it's very, very small amount. And the other issue I have with that is actually defining what an illicit use for the currency is anyway. You know, in my case, am I a criminal because I want to play online poker, right? You know, it's how do you define that? And I think that there's some examples where it has been really beneficial, probably despite being a problem for different governments around the world, right? So if you look at a country like Venezuela, over the past several years, they have just been absolutely reeling. It's not a good place to be living, largely because of a complete debasement and devaluing of the currency in their country. So they reached a certain point where their faith in the currency was completely lost for a lot of different reasons. The government wasn't particularly happy about it. They want them to use this currency so they can, maintain power over them. But one of the ways that people were able to kind of reestablish or rebuild some kind of stability in their country were through usage of cryptocurrencies. So Venezuela today remains one of the biggest users of cryptocurrencies around the world. So it's not only is it a way to circumvent the government's definition of what an illicit use is, right, for buying things and selling things, but it's also a way to kind of add stability to certain jurisdictions around the world that might not have any. All right, so many people might argue that Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value. It's just digits. It's on the internet. It's not anything real. It's fairy dust, right? How can you invest in something like this, right? And on the other side of the coin, there's people who will compare it to gold or to silver, right? And they'll say, well, why would I own Bitcoin when I can just own something that has physical value? And the problem I have with gold and silver too is that just like Bitcoin, these things are subject to supply and demand forces. The bar of gold in 10 years, and this is what a lot of those professional investors like Munger and Buffett will say, is a bar of gold today is in 10 years is still going to be a bar of gold, right? But if you invest in a company and it grows over time, then it's going to have an increased intrinsic value, right? Now, I think that the argument for Bitcoin having more intrinsic value over time is the kind of the proof of concept that we've seen over the last decade. Over time, it gets more and more interest. And over the past year, we've gotten to a point where we're starting to see institutional investors getting in, and I think today around somewhere, I could be wrong on this, somewhere around 5% of institutional investors are invested in this thing too, right? And I think that the probability of that, and it's probably something I can't quantify in the same way I could with a business, of that increasing is only going to go up, right? There's going to be more interest in this in the next 5 or 10 years, right? Okay, so recently a famous individual, Elon, has came out and kind of reversed his opinion on Bitcoin, which is caused a lot of drama. Personally, I don't really care. I don't get involved in those kinds of things. If one guy wants to have an opinion, he wants to change his opinion, who cares? It doesn't. That has no a bearing on my on a decision for me to invest in a cryptocurrency or not. And also, there's a recent news story that's timing seems oddly suspicious, where China has come out and said they're banning cryptocurrencies. And to me, this is another thing. It's like, China's been trying to ban all kinds of currencies for a long time. Which was kind of funny. I played a video game a long time ago, World of Warcraft, and they used to have the Chinese in this game. And there's one way you can almost think of the currency in this game as like a cryptocurrency, the gold in the game. And I know they had some weird law I remember learning about, where they were allowed to sell the currency, but they weren't allowed to buy it. So China just has all of these weird rules regarding currencies. And they still mine tremendous amounts of Bitcoin. So if whether or not they can successfully ban Bitcoin, or they even intend to, personally, I would like to see if that's actually possible, right? Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about with Bitcoin is who owns it, right? Yes, there has been some investments in institutional investors recently. I noticed in the last dip, there's some articles I read where they're buying more on this dip. But we still need to keep in mind that the people who own this currency largely remains retail. The individual investors, small scale, people like me, right? What a lot of these people tend to do, just like Munger mentioned before, they get involved, they become involved emotionally. So when the price is going up, a lot of them buy, and when the prices go down, a lot of them sell. And we've seen this a few times in Bitcoin's life cycle. There was a jump from where it hit 1,000 very rapidly, went down by a fifth, I think, went to 20,000 in 2017 and went down by a fifth after. And then it went to recently to 60,000. And I think what we're starting to see here is that it is probably going to go back towards the mean in the next several months. And some of the reasons I think that are some of the reasons I mentioned in my commodity video before. When we think about retail investors over the past year, a lot of those have been Americans who have been investing in crypto. And they have been buying heavily into this inflation narrative. And at the same time, a lot of these people have had tremendously higher incomes because of all of the federal government's spending over the last year. So for me, a lot of that money has found its way and kind of artificially inflated the Bitcoin market. And I think that in the next several months, as these unemployment benefits are coming to a close, the stimulus money has worked its way through the system, I find that it's the likelihood that we find a retracement to those prior COVID levels is really likely. And so I mentioned that I don't own any Bitcoin currently, but that's what I'm looking for. For me to get involved in Bitcoin, that's probably when I would start to get involved again, when the prices start to get into those 10 to 15K levels. And that's my prediction. We'll see whether it gets there or not. But if it does, that's where I would be looking to buy Bitcoin. So what do you guys think? Is Bitcoin rat poison? Is it garbage? Is it going to zero? Or do you think that it's going to be the world's new currency? I don't think so, personally. And maybe you have any insights on where you think the price is going. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, have a great weekend.